Let's talk now to Dr. Tony Agbons, researcher, senior lecturer, Anglia Ruskin University in the British capital, London. Good morning to you, Dr. Agbons. Thank you for your time. Welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, Ladi. Good to see you again. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and I trust you're in good health as well.
Absolutely.
Let's start off with all these military alliances that we're seeing. Where most parties, either direct parties or indirect parties to the conflict, reaching. A few weeks ago, we were told that the United States would join India in participating in some military drills along its border with China. Now, this morning, it's being reported that China will participate with Moscow, that's Russia, in military drills in the eastern Russian region. Meanwhile, North Korea and Russia had just announced an extension of their benefits system and partnership a couple of hours before that. And of course, you also have all these other partnerships with India and Turkey and a number of others. Do you see all of this all happening at the same time, giving room for, one, an enlarging of this conflict, but more importantly, a loss of focus that could lead to a miscalculation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ladi. First of all, I just want to, again, it's really difficult saying this all the time when discussing this Russia-Ukraine crisis, to, commiserate with the families who have lost their dear ones in this crisis that has lingered on for so long. Today, in the next 2 days, it's going to be exactly 6 months that this crisis started, since February the 20th. And there seems to be no end in sight. Listening to all the alignment and realignment that you were reeling out, I was just, feeling a bit, uneasy, because it's rather unfortunate that the rest of the world has not been able to come to grasp with what this crisis is about, the humanitarian crisis that it has brought, about in Ukraine. People are not even getting to grasp with it. And I was discussing with a friend yesterday, and I was like, it's like the world, things are just going back to normal. People are beginning to forget that there's a war going on somewhere. And this alignment you talked about, Russia, North Korea, United States, India, even some countries in the world who before now are non-aligned, like Switzerland, Finland, some Scandinavian nations. Some have even joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, because nobody is sure anymore. But when I look at all this, and then I begin to look at what is the role of the United Nations in all this? Because someone, somewhere, need to pick the gauntlet and stop all this crisis that is going on.
Let's talk a little bit about the humanitarian side of it that you mentioned, because in a great deal of the reporting, that has also fallen to the back of the room. A lot of attention is being focused on the battlefront and who is getting which weapons and who is capturing which town and all of that. Not as much attention is being paid to those who have been displaced, which you pointed out. People displaced internally within Ukraine, people displaced externally who have had to flee to other countries, including Britain, where you are, where there's a scheme to receive a particular number of them and house them for a particular period. Now, what do you make of that situation? And even though there isn't much attention in terms of spotlight, media spotlight on it, do you think that enough is being done as we speak about those people who have had to flee?
Yeah, I think when you look at the scale of the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, I would say on a scale, there's been a lot of effort, the UN, the Red Cross, a lot of religious organizations, at least many I know of, like Christian organizations who have jumped in, a lot of NGOs and charities. A lot has been done, to make sure that people get some succor. That we can, readily admit. But however, more has actually been done with, getting military equipment, a lot like the US, the NATO, the European Union. It's been more of, trying to get more defenses, trying to get more artillery and weapons of war. That has been actually more resources have been put into that. So, but as we speak, the humanitarian crisis is not abating. There's still a lot of refugees, Ukrainians who are moving, especially to neighboring countries. Some are fleeing to Poland, to nearby countries, that are close to their border. So it is a very, very disheartening situation. And for me, I just, looking at the whole crisis, I just think that more need to be done by the United Nations to stop this carnage.
Well, the United Nations, as some of my previous guests have said, appears a bit powerless in this situation because one of the combatants in this particular case is a Security Council member with veto power. And that once that is involved, the United Nations mechanism cannot really kick in. But that in spite of that, it was the UN working with Turkey that put in place the grain deal. And that some people were hoping that that could be a basis on which to build for substantive peace talks. Do you think so?
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I was just going to, highlight the effort of the Turkish President Erdogan in brokering the grain exports, which has stopped since this war broke out. So I see that some effort have been put in, but this is just my personal opinion, but I just feel more need to be done. Because you can see the global economic crisis that this war is causing all over the world. So everybody is feeling it. But kudos to President Erdogan of Turkey for what for being able to broker that deal so that Ukraine can continue to export its grains from the seaport, which was closed since the war began. So we must commend that. That is very, very commendable.
Let me bring you as an academic and a researcher. Let me bring in, and then of course you being a Nigerian. Let me bring in the African context of all of this. Africa came into this conflict mostly as a spectator for most of the last 5 or 6 months. We were just mostly watching. But then all of a sudden there was a flurry of activity, mostly galvanized by energy supply crisis and an attempt to expand markets by some of the major players. As I just said before I came to you, Antony Blinken, Sergei Lavrov, and Emmanuel Macron were on the continent at almost the same time, visiting different countries. Did this come to you as some kind of surprise? And how did you think Africa responded? Was its response pragmatic?
Yeah, I think to be honest, Ladi, the African response to me was more of what is in it for me. I was listening to the French President Macron, speaking in Benin Republic and Cameroon this week, and he wasn't too happy with the response of African nations in this crisis, because most African countries have refused to call the crisis a war. Some African countries have actually referred to it as a military operation, and you know the reason why. Because African countries are not food dependent. A lot of them, they get support from Russia and all that. And like you said, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov too, he was also, on a diplomatic tour. He went to the DR Congo, he went to South Africa, he went to Uganda. And especially the one in Uganda, or listening to the Uganda President Yoweri Museveni, And that was just like shaking my head as, look, what's going on here? People are being killed. This is just and this brings to the fore why Africa, we need to be self-sufficient in food production. We need to be self-sufficient in the management of our resources. Because for me, the way most African countries have taken this crisis, I just see it as, what we refer to in business terms as value for bread. It's appalling.
Let me come to where you are currently based in London. Britain apart from America, Britain has probably been the largest single country that has backed Ukraine since this conflict started. And that was down to mostly Prime Minister Boris Johnson's front and center. I went to Kiev twice, I believe, and there are Ukrainian military troops undergoing training in Britain, even as we speak. But then there is a leadership challenge, a leadership battle going on within the United Kingdom. And there are those who have asked, some of those I've spoken to have said that, no, there's broad-based support for Ukraine, and it was not just Boris Johnson. Is that true? And do you think that whether it is Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak that takes over thereafter, this robust support for Ukraine will continue?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to continue. The United Kingdom has been a dependable ally for the people of Ukraine under our outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And I think it's going to continue. And the reason is that either of Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, they've been part of the Boris Johnson government. They know the drill. And as well, the people of the United Kingdom, believe that it's the right thing to do, to give support to a country that is under attack. So I think that support is going to continue. But whether it's going to be as dynamic as it has been under Boris Johnson is something that time alone can tell.
Finally, before I let you go, I want to ask, because it's good to put a face to it. When you read the statistics that the United Kingdom has its highest inflation rate in 40 years, there's huge energy bills and all of that. How do you feel the reading on the streets in London? Are people linking that situation with what is going on in Ukraine? And if so, what are their views about what governments or government should do to ameliorate their own situation, even though they are not at war?
The truth is the energy crisis, not just in the United Kingdom, the whole of Europe has taken its toll. It's taking its toll on everyone. The economic situation is biting. UK inflation is at all-time high, highest it has ever been in 40 years. A lot of families are struggling. There's a fear that during the cold winter months that we will soon get into, many families will not be able to heat up their homes. So there's a lot of apprehension. And on the street, you hear people, there's a lot of scare. People are scared. And the government has not really come up with any package, to give confidence to the people, obviously because of the leadership, Prime Minister leadership issue that we're having at the moment. So there's the horizon is looking really bleak, and there is a very high level of apprehension here in the UK with regards to the high cost of living. Grocery prices have gone up. The Bank of England has raised the interest rates. They're putting all measures in place, but nothing seems to be working. But, and this is the angle I always put in, the human angle of economics. The energy companies recently declared huge profits they've never had before, and then they are raising prices. So we are looking at humanity and capitalism. So I think that is one area that people are talking about in the UK now, that there should be a balance. It's not just about making profits, human beings need to be able to live comfortably without fear, so that the country can move on.
Of course, that is where the issue of the windfall tax and the debate around the windfall tax comes to light.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of pushing, there's a lot of advocacy in that regard, that there should be a windfall tax. And I think the government is listening. They haven't got a choice. They have to listen to the people who actually they are serving.
Indeed. Dr. Edwards, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure having you join us from the British capital, London.
Thank you, Ladi. It's been my pleasure.